Hello and Nyob to each and every one of you. In today's video, I wanted to talk to you all about egg roll wrappers. Now, egg roll wrappers are used to wrap egg rolls, or also known as spring rolls, lumpias, and there's so many types of brands, shapes, and sizes out there that I was curious myself to see if there was any difference, price comparison, taste comparison, lots of different things about it that I wanted to test out. So I went to my local Asian grocery store and bought 7 different kinds so that all of you can see how they cooked out. So it's going to be quite a long video just because I want to put as much information as I can so that all of you can learn something, try it out for yourself, go check out all these different types of egg roll wrappers that are available at your local Asian grocery store and see which one fits your palate. So with that being said, let's just get straight to it and learn a little bit more about egg roll wrappers. Let's go. Egg rolls are also known as spring rolls, whichever way you like to call it, is probably one of the most popular and amazing appetizers, snack, or sides to have any time of the year. Besides the filling, the most important ingredient to making egg rolls are the wrappers. Now, there's different types of wrappers out there in terms of shapes and sizes, thickness, and also brand. Now, most people will call these spring rolls, but I grew up calling them egg rolls since spring rolls can get a little confusing when referring to the Vietnamese fresh spring rolls, which are made with rice paper, fresh vegetables, meat, and it's usually not fried. But you can often see egg rolls being called spring rolls and vice versa. From my understanding, spring rolls are usually made with spring vegetables as the filling, hence the name, and it's mostly made with only vegetables and no meat. The wrapper is usually lighter, thinner, and a lot more crispier versus egg rolls, which is usually made with a thicker type of wrapper and it's usually filled with meat and vegetables. It's a little bit heartier and it's less delicate, but depending on what you choose to call it, most people will understand what you're referring to. Since I grew up calling these egg rolls, I'm going to call these egg rolls in this video. Now, egg roll wrappers usually have just 4 main ingredients, which includes flour, water, some type of oil, and salt for seasoning. But you can typically see other ingredients in there, including some preservatives, some other leavening, and maybe some eggs and soy and other type of starches. Egg roll wrappers are best used when they're filled with a certain type of filling. They are amazing fried for its crispy texture and golden color. It's usually made to be used to make egg rolls or spring rolls, but you can also use egg roll wrappers for other fried goods as well. Besides frying, you can also steam egg roll wrappers and use it for fresh steam rolls as well. You can easily find egg roll wrappers at the frozen section of almost all Asian grocery store. You can also find it at the refrigerator section at your local grocery store as well, but they might have different brands and variety. They come in all shapes and sizes, as well as different types of brand that makes different amounts. There are so many different brands out there, you would have to see what your local Asian grocery store provides. So today I went to my local Asian grocery store and found 7 different brands of egg roll wrappers that I wanted to try out and show you all how they turn out. So the first 4 I'm going to be talking about is probably the most common ones that you will probably find at your local Asian grocery store. The first one is going to be Spring Home. Now, Spring Home is probably the #1 most common brand that you will probably find at your local Asian grocery store, and they come in different numbers of sheets. So you'll see 25 pack, a 50 pack, and a 40 pack, and they also come in a smaller size as well. So they have smaller size egg roll wrappers here that you can use to make even smaller egg rolls. So I bought the 25 sheet pack here, which costs about $2.49 per pack. Depending on the Asian grocery store that you end up going, it might be even cheaper, but it usually range around $2 to $2.50. And in terms of ingredients, this one doesn't have as much as the other brands. But let's open it up and see what it looks like. So Spring Home is a square shaped wrapper, and as you can tell, it's quite easy to peel already. So it's coming off fairly easy, so that's a pretty good sign. It feels pretty good. It's pretty flexible. It's not too dry and not too thick. It's a little bit on the thinner side as I peel this. As you can see, it's a little bit soft and sticky, but it doesn't seem to be drying out, which is really good. Most egg roll wrappers, you do have to peel it before you use it, and you also want to keep them covered so that they don't dry out as you roll. I'm going to fill it with my go-to egg roll filling recipe. I will have a video on that, so stay tuned for that as well. But today we're just going to be focusing on the wrapper. So this feels really easy to roll, and their egg rolls are coming out super beautiful. My only complaint is that it is fairly thin, so you can see a little bit of that filling. But other than that, it's a beautiful egg roll. Let's go ahead and fry these and see how they look. And this is what it looks like. So they fried up fairly good. The egg rolls are beautiful, still stayed its shape. My only concern is that because it's on the thinner side, a lot of the moisture from the filling was trying to escape and evaporate. So you can see a little bit of the burnt edges on the side of the egg roll. Other than that, it looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and cut this in half just so you can hear how crispy it is. So yeah, this has a really good crisp texture to it. And the crunch is pretty good. So overall, spring home wrappers are pretty flexible texturally to use, and they peel nicely. It's also nice to see that they have different sheet counts per pack and different dimensions that you can buy. It's fairly cheap per pack, so about $2.49 each for the 25 sheet pack. It does refreeze well, so if you end up not using it, you can wrap it really well and freeze it again and then use it again. But I only would recommend to freeze it once, and it has a pretty decent crisp texture after it's fried. So for the cons, one of the things I didn't really like was that it took quite a long time to get to a golden color, which caused the filling to create these burnt ends because it was cooking too long. So this one had probably the lightest color compared to all the other brands that I tested. It can be a little bit too thin to work with, especially if you make a pretty semi-wet filling. So the moisture will try or typically seep out and will probably have a little bit of burnt edges to it as you fry it. The wrapper doesn't have much flavor to it, but overall it does the job, and it's a fairly decent egg roll wrapper. The next most common one that you will probably find at your local Asian grocery store is Menlo. And Menlo is the brand that I grew up using just because of how affordable it is and how easy it is to find at our local Asian grocery store. This is probably the only size and count that they have. Each pack has about 30 wrappers, and this pack cost me about $2.49. Like most other brands, the bag will contain ingredients and directions on how to make egg rolls and how to roll them. So that's pretty neat. In terms of ingredients, Menlo probably has the most ingredients compared to all the other brands that I tested. And this is probably the only one that contains eggs. But let's go ahead and take a look at the wrapper. So this one is a square shaped wrapper, and it is fairly thick compared to Spring Home, as you can tell here. This pack in particular was fairly easy to peel. I'm going to add in some filling and see how it rolls out. And this is what it looks like. It's a little bit on the thicker side, so it was a little bit harder to make a tighter egg roll. Other than that, it still looks pretty good. I don't have any cracks on the ends here, so that's a plus. Now let's go ahead and fry it and see how it is. And here we have it. This is what Menlo fries out to look like. It's pretty golden in color and fairly even. Because it is a little bit thicker than Spring Home, the moisture from the filling didn't really cause any issue to the ends here, but it looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and cut this in half. It has a pretty okay crisp sound to it and a pretty decent crunch, so it's not too bad. So some of the pros for using Menlo egg roll wrappers is that it probably had the most golden color out of all the ones that I tested when it's fried. It has quite a pretty good flavor to it as well. I did notice that it contained eggs and soy, so it gives it an extra level of flavor, and also with the coloring when it's fried. It can be pretty easy to peel depending on the pack. The egg roll has a pretty nice crisp texture to it, but it can get soggy fairly easy if it's not maintained well. It holds its shape pretty well when it's rolled, frozen, and fried, and it's pretty affordable. So it was about $2.49 per pack, and it is pretty easy to find at most Asian grocery store. So some of the cons I noticed is that some of the packs can be a little bit inconsistent in terms of the way it peels and texturally. So sometimes I notice some of the edges drying out a little bit more than other packs that I bought, and some packs are a little bit harder to peel compared to other packs. This wrapper also for some reason soaks up a little bit more grease when it's fried compared to the other brand. So if you are concerned about the greasy flavor and taste, then Menlo might not be for you. The wrapper can be a little bit too thick for others as well. I have noticed recently that Menlo, for some reason, they probably changed the thickness of the wrapper. I've noticed that it's become a little bit thicker compared to the years that I've been using it, but who knows, that might just be my pack that I bought. Another thing to note is that Menlo is only best to use the day that it is thawed. It can dry out if you refreeze it, but that can be solved by just re-steaming it again to give it a little bit of moisture. Okay, so the next most common one that you could probably find is Wei Chuan. And Wei Chuan comes in different sheet counts and they have different thickness as well. But the one I bought here has the orange border to it, and this one has a 25 sheet count for about $2.29 a pack. In terms of ingredients, it has a little bit more than Spring Home. It does contain rice starch and other preservatives as well. And the back shows you how to use it fried and how to use it steamed. So that's pretty cool. Let's go ahead and take a look at the wrapper. And this one is also square shaped. And this little spot here got soggy because an ice particle kind of melted on there as I was defrosting it. So it got kind of soggy. But so far it seems to look like it'll peel pretty easily. So this little soggy part created a hole there, which is fine. We can work with it. Overall, the wrapper feels pretty good. It's not too dry. It's pretty flexible to work with, and it's not too thick or too thin either. So it's in the middle, and it's fairly easy to peel. Now, Wei Chuan also has this one as well, and this one is the one with the yellow border. In terms of ingredients, it's pretty much almost the same as the one with the orange border. The only difference with this one is that this one does not contain any rice starch. In terms of thickness, I did notice that this one felt a little bit thicker and a little bit drier than the one with the orange border. But honestly, you can choose either or. They both work fairly the same. Let's fill it and see how it rolls. The wrapper feels pretty good and pretty flexible, and it's pretty easy to work with. And it made a pretty good looking egg roll. No cracks on each end, so that's a plus. Let's drop it into the oil. And here we have the Wei Chuan bread. So it fried out to be pretty even and had a really good golden color to it. Some of the moisture from the filling did create a little bit of burnt ends, but it's not too bad. It was pretty easy to roll and it fried pretty evenly. Let's go ahead and cut this in half. It has a pretty nice crisp sound to it. And the crunch is fairly good. So the pros for Wei Chuan is that each pack is fairly cheap. So the pack that I bought, which was a 25 sheet pack, only cost me about $2.29. It's fairly soft, flexible, and easy to use, and it peels pretty nice. Wei Chuan also has different dimensions and sizes that you can buy. It has a pretty nice golden and even color to it when it's fried, and a pretty good crispness to it, but it does kind of get soggy fairly easy if it's not maintained well. Some of the cons would be that even though it has a pretty nice crispness to it, it can get pretty soggy fast. But again, that also depends on the filling that you end up making and how you maintain the egg rolls. It does refreeze okay if it's stored correctly, but I noticed that some ice particles, when thawing, it can also soften it and kind of ruin the shape and texture, so it can be a little bit harder to use. And then the fourth brand that you could probably find at most Asian grocery store is Simex. Now Simex is a Filipino brand, and they have two different kinds, one in the red pack here and then the blue pack here. Now the red pack contains 50 sheets per pack, and this pack cost me about $5.49. I do love the packaging. It shows you pictures and ways they like to use it, and in the back tells you ingredients, directions, and how to fold egg rolls, so that's pretty neat. By the way, is it Simex or Simex? Let me know in the comments down below. In terms of ingredients, this one doesn't have much either. It's mostly just flour, water, coconut oil, salt, and some preservatives. Now this blue pack is a little bit different in terms of the number of sheets that it has. This one only has 30 sheets, and this one comes individually already separated. And this one cost me about $6.99 for a 30 sheet pack. You have less sheets and it's a little bit more expensive compared to the red pack because this one, each wrapper is already individually separated. So you're pretty much paying for the labor of not having to peel the wrappers. So that's the only difference with the blue pack here, is that it only contains 30 sheets per pack. It's already individually separated and it's a little bit more expensive. But let's go ahead and take a look at the wrappers. Compared to all the other wrappers, this one is actually round shape. And just by looking at the sides here, I can already tell it is a little bit hard to peel. It feels fairly thin. As you can tell, you can already see my hands through it. Since it's on a thinner side, I found it to be a little bit harder to peel, and each wrapper is kind of inconsistent in shape, so it makes sense why they sell individually already separated wrappers. So if you don't want to spend the time to peel it, spend more money and buy the one that is already peeled. but I do love the way it looks because it does have that really nice homemade look to it, like making the wrappers on a pan with your hands. So that's pretty neat, and I do appreciate that. But let's go ahead and fill it and see how well they roll. So this one wasn't too bad to work with. I did find that it does dry out fairly fast, so make sure you keep it covered. But this is what it looks like. It's not really the prettiest. I had a harder time to make this into a really nice tight egg roll. As you can tell, some of the sides were cracking and you can see a little bit of the wrapper ripping right here. But let's fry it and see how they turn out. And this is what it looks like. It actually fried out to be pretty nice. It had a really good golden color to it, and it came out to be pretty crispy. Let's go ahead and cut this in half. And this is what it looks like. Because the wrapper is so thin, it was super light to cut through it actually. And a super light and crispy texture. I really like that. So some of the things I like about Simex is that it has a really good golden color to it, and it was pretty even when it was fried. It's super light and fairly crispy. It was texturally pleasing and pretty fun to eat just because of how light and airy the wrapper was when it fried up. It's pretty mild in flavor, so the filling shines more in flavor, whereas the wrapper shines more in texture. So they both balance each other out. The wrapper is great for frying and for steaming, so you can use it both ways. And I do appreciate the homemade and rustic look to it. So some of the cons is that the wrapper could be a little bit too thin to work with, and it was kind of hard to peel. But they do sell individually separated ones, so that's a plus. It is easy to roll, but since the wrapper is so thin, it can dry easily. It tends to crack as you roll it, so make sure you keep it covered. Each wrapper can be inconsistent in size and shape. It doesn't really do a good job refreezing, as it will continue to dry out and crack if you're going to reuse it again. But I recommend steaming it for a couple of minutes just so that you can have a little bit of flexibility to work with. And it's a little bit more on the expensive side. So it's around $5.49 a pack for 50 sheets. So, I mean, it's not too bad for the amount of sheets that you get, but it is fairly pricey if you wanted to invest in this brand. So the next three brands are ones that I found that were made locally, ones that I saw for the first time, and then one that I wanted to share with you since it's kind of what you would commonly find at your general grocery store, and it's used mostly for the egg rolls that most of you would probably see being made in most American Chinese restaurants. So this brand is the Oh Tasty brand, and I've never actually used this one before, so this was my first time seeing it at the grocery store, and I wanted to try it out. So each pack comes with 25 sheets, and it costs about $2.49 a pack. And in the back it also includes directions and ingredients, so that's pretty neat. Overall, the ingredients are pretty simple. It has flour, you have your water, your salt, and some preservatives. And this one is also square shaped. This one feels a little thick, but it looks like it's going to be pretty easy to peel. And yeah, this is pretty easy to peel. But let's go ahead and put the filling in. and it rolls pretty easily. I can make this into a pretty tight egg roll. The wrapper is a little bit on the thicker side, kind of like Menlo, but it makes a pretty decent looking egg roll. Not too bad. The ends are nice and sealed and there's no cracks, so that's pretty cool. Let's fry these up. And here we have it. This is the Oh Tasty brand, and surprisingly, this one came out to be very, very nice. I'm pretty impressed by this one, actually. The color was even golden brown. It's super crispy on the outside. A lot of the moisture from the filling didn't really seep out to the ends, so you don't really get much burnt ends, so that's pretty neat. I'm going to cut this in half. And overall, you can hear how crisp this is, and it feels really crunchy. So actually, it has a really good light crunch to it. It's pretty good. So some of the things I really like about Oh Tasty is how easy it is to work with. It's pretty flexible and it peels nicely. It had probably one of the most even and nice golden color when it's fried. Not only does it fry good, but it also has a really good crispness to it and flavor. And it's pretty affordable. So a pack of 25 sheets only cost me $2.49. Some of the cons for Oh Tasty is that it can be a little bit too thick to use, which can cause the egg roll to be a little bit more on the chewier side compared to more of a light and crispy texture. It might not also be easily accessible depending on the area that you live and what your grocery store provides. But Oh Tasty honestly had pretty good crispness to it. If you do let it sit out for more than an hour or two, it does get soggy and the chewiness does get stronger. So I highly recommend if you're going to use this brand to eat the egg rolls as soon as it's made. The next one is Summit. Now Summit is actually made locally. This one comes with 30 sheets per pack and it costs about $2.69. Now we turn to the back. It also has ingredients and directions on how to make egg rolls, so that's pretty neat as well. In terms of ingredients, this one's also pretty simple. It just has flour, you have your water, your salt, and preservatives. This one is also square shape, and it looks like it's going to be fairly easy to peel. It's already coming apart like this, so that's pretty neat. The wrapper is not too thick. It's a little bit more on a thinner side. And yeah, this one actually peels pretty easily. There's some flour in between each sheet, so it actually prevents it from sticking, which is not too bad. I'm going to go ahead and add in the filling. But overall, it's pretty easy to work with, and the egg roll comes out pretty nice and pretty like this. The ends are sealed and there's no cracks, so that's really good to see. Let's fry these up. And this is the Summit brand. Now this one actually fried up to be a little bit more on the lighter side. I would say it's probably a little bit more golden to spring home, but it's still a little bit on the lighter side for me. Because it is on the thinner side, a little bit of the moisture from the filling did create burnt ends, but that's all right. It's not the worst one I've tried. Let's go ahead and cut this in half. And it has a pretty decent crunch to it. Texturally, I could already feel a little bit of sogginess to it just because the wrappers are a little bit on the thinner side, but it's not too bad. So this one has an okay crunch to it. Texturally, it feels a little bit soggy already. I would say it doesn't retain much of its crunch as it sits. So this one, I recommend eating it as soon as you can. So some of the things I like about Summit is that it's pretty easy to work with. It peels pretty easily. It has a pretty decent crispness to it after it's fried, and it's pretty affordable. It's about $2.69 per pack. So some of the cons for Summit is that since it is made locally, it can be hard to find across the states. So it really depends on your grocery store and if they have it or not. It's a little bit on the thinner side, so the filling moisture can seep out. And the color is a little bit on the lighter side after it's fried. And the wrapper kind of lacks flavor. But other than that, it does the job. And then the last one is Dynasty. And this one comes with around 20 to 25 wrappers, and it costs about $4.79 a pack. Ingredient wise, this one has your flour, your salt, water, preservatives, and this one also has cornstarch. And the back also includes cooking directions and also some recipes. So for this type of egg roll wrapper, you can find multiple different brands, either in the refrigerator section or the freezer section. And all of these brands are pretty much the same in terms of texture and thickness. When you fry them, they will create this bubbly outer texture. So whichever one you choose, it will create that type of egg roll that you're looking for. So this one is square shape. It's fairly thick compared to all the other wrappers that we used, and as you can tell, it has quite a lot of starch on it already to prevent it from sticking to each other and to make it a lot easier to peel. But this is what it looks like. It's pretty heavy on the starch and it's fairly thick, as you can tell here. And this one doesn't need to be peeled at all, so let's go ahead and add in the filling. It's pretty easy to work with. It's pretty flexible. My only problem is that it's really powdery, so that's kind of different compared to all the other ones. Since this wrapper is a little bit on the thicker side, it can be a little bit harder to roll, especially if you want to put more filling in. But other than that, it doesn't look too bad. There's no cracks on the ends here, and it looks like a pretty good clean cut egg roll. Now time to fry them. And here we have it. This is the Dynasty brand. As you can tell, the egg rolls fried up to be pretty golden brown, and the exterior is a little bit more on the bubbly side. So there's quite a lot of texture on the outside. It's not all completely golden brown. You can see the ends are a little bit darker than the center, but it looks pretty decent. Let's go ahead and cut this in half. And this is what it looks like. Now this one I put a little bit more filling in just to see how well I can roll and seal it completely. And this one didn't turn out too bad. It looks pretty good. So the exterior texture feels pretty crispy, but it's starting to already get soggy. Now I'm going to cut one that I put a little bit more less filling in so you can see what it looks like. And the reason I want to show you this one is because if you do put less filling in, there's more wrapper in the middle. And so that wrapper in the middle tends to look like it's not cooked all the way through because it is fairly thick. As you can tell here, this is what it would look like. And this would be probably one of my issues when using these type of egg roll wrapper. So yeah, if you can, try your best to fill it as much as you can, as long as you can roll and seal it completely. And the crunch is just all right. It has a pretty good flavor to it, but if you really want that light and delicate crispy texture to it, this egg roll will probably not be the one for you. It's a little bit more on the heavier side. So for Dynasty, some of the things I liked about it is that it does create a pretty bubbly outer texture. So texturally, it's kind of fun to have that. It does have a pretty nice flavor, especially with savory fillings, and it does peel easily with the amount of cornstarch that they add on there to help make it peel easier. So some of the issues I have with this type of wrapper is that it is a little bit too thick to work with. So if you're not a fan of this type of wrapper, it might not be for you. It's a little bit too powdery. I find that they put a little bit too much cornstarch, so it can dry out your wrapper. Because it's so thick, it can take a little bit longer to fry. The center doesn't seem to cook all the way through, so that was my issue with it. This wrapper is ideal for making bigger egg rolls if you wanted to make bigger egg rolls, but it might be a little bit harder to roll. And it's quite expensive as well. This one costs about $4.79 a pack. And if you don't finish using the wrappers, I find that it doesn't really refreeze well because it will continue to dry out. This one doesn't really have that light and crisp texture that you will want compared to the other one because of how thick it is. So it really depends on what you like. If you like this texture, this one might be for you. If you like wrappers that are more on the lighter and crispier side, then the other ones might be for you. And that's it for all the wrappers that I tested. Hopefully all that information helps you out in deciding which one might be the one for you. But here's some more information that I thought you would be interested in knowing. Since most egg roll wrapper comes frozen, you would typically let it thaw out for about 20 to 30 minutes in room temperature before you peel it and use it. I don't recommend thawing it in the fridge overnight because your wrappers can either get soggy or too dry to work with. So just thaw it out the day that you're going to use it. Leave it at room temperature for about 20 to 30 minutes or more depending on your environment to allow it to thaw, but it should still be cold when you're peeling it. Now, if you don't finish using the wrappers, some of them do refreeze pretty well. Just make sure you wrap it really good in plastic wrap or put it in a Ziploc bag and place it back in the freezer and then defrost it again if you want to use it again. But if you do refreeze them again, they do dry out if you thaw it again to use it. So the best way to give them a little bit of moisture is to steam it. So you could place it into a steamer and let it steam for a couple minutes, about 2 to 3 minutes, to allow extra moisture to kind of just give them a little bit of flexibility. And they should look something like this. So it just gives it a little bit more moisture to allow you to have some flexibility to work with. But you do have to work with it pretty fast or keep them covered or else they will dry fairly fast. And the only one I don't like to refreeze is Dynasty because in particular this type of wrapper is a little bit too thick, so when you freeze it, it dries out completely, and so when you wrap an egg roll, it cracks and it just does not work. So some of you might be curious which wrapper stays the crispiest the longest. And my answer to that is, it really depends. It depends on what type of filling you're making. If you have a filling that has a little bit more moisture in there, more vegetables, a filling that just has a lot of hydration, then it will cause your wrapper to become soggy fairly fast. Now, some of the thinner type wrappers do create a super light and crispy texture and crunch to it, and some of them last fairly well. If you let it sit out for an hour or two, it does stay pretty crispy, but again, it also depends on the environment. If you live in a more humid place, your egg rolls might get soggy a lot faster compared to if you're living in a drier area. So for my testing, all of these egg roll had about a 2-hour crunch limit to it in my environment. But with egg rolls, I highly recommend eating them while they are still fresh and hot. They are the best when they are freshly fried. But if you do want to reheat them again, my favorite way to reheat egg rolls is to simply put it into the air fryer for a couple of minutes to give it that crispness back up. You could also do it in the oven or in a pan, but it just doesn't have the same texture as if you're going to do it into the air fryer. And then some of you might be asking, can you freeze the egg rolls that you make if you make too much? And the answer is yes. You can put it onto a sheet tray lined with either parchment paper and place it one by one like this next to each other, and then you'll place this into the freezer and let it freeze completely before you bag it into a Ziploc bag or a container, whatever you like to store it in, and then just place it back in the freezer, and then you can fry it up whenever you crave it. But my recommendation for frying up frozen egg rolls is to make sure you let it thaw for about an hour or two in room temperature before you fry it, just so that you can get it out of that frozen solid state. But this is what frying frozen egg rolls looks like. As you can tell, it's obviously not as pretty as frying fresh egg rolls that you made the day of, but they still retain their crispness and golden brown color to it. But the only problem with frying frozen egg rolls is that since you're freezing the filling, especially if you have fillings that are made with a lot of vegetables or anything that contains a lot of moisture, when you fry it, the ends here like this turns a little bit too golden brown. You'll get some burnt ends like this, which I have here. And for these, I actually fry them straight out of the freezer into the oil. And what happens is it's a little bit too cold, so a lot of the moisture was trying to release itself, and a lot of the ends here burnt like this. But if you let it sit out at room temperature for about 2 hours to kind of let the initial frozen state get a little bit defrosted, it fries up pretty good like this, and it should look something like this. So yeah, you can freeze unfried frozen egg rolls and then fry it up whenever you want to, and it will stay super crispy and also still very delicious. And then out of all of these brands, Dynasty was probably the one that I don't recommend freezing and then frying, because it just does not fry out good. You can tell the outer texture is not as bubbly as if you're frying it the day of that you're making it. And texturally, it's just not pleasing. It's not as crispy, and it's just a little bit more chewier. But other than that, keeping frozen unfried egg rolls in the freezer is super convenient whenever you just want to fry up some egg rolls for a quick snack, or if you want to prep ahead of time and just wake up the next day and fry it up for a potluck or an occasion. It works perfectly well. Now, I know there's quite a lot more different brands out there, and every store is different in what they provide, especially in the area that we all live in. All of the Asian grocery store in my area only provides these type and brand of egg roll wrappers, so these were the ones I tried. I know a lot of you recommended me some of these brands to try, but I can't find them in my area just because they don't provide it here. So hopefully, if I do get a hands on them, I can give them a try and see what I think about it. But if you do have a specific brand that you like to use, do let me know, because I am curious. So hopefully this video helps you out. I know that was a lot of information, but for all of these information, you can check out my website. I included pictures and quite a lot of information to get to know a little bit more about these brands and how they turn out for me, and hopefully for you to get a little bit more understanding of which one that can possibly be a fit for you. And that wraps up today's video. So stay tuned for my next video. I'll be showing you my go-to egg roll recipe so that all of you can try out that and figure out which egg roll wrapper you like to use. Other than that, I will see you in my next video.